Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for the introduction, Deanna. If you have engaged with me or worked with me at all, you may know that I'm a J when it comes to our Myers Briggs typology. And that means that for the most part, not always, but I can be really organized and structured and sometimes black and white. And so, as the founding principal of an elementary school, 24 years old, I was kind of a stickler with the rules when it came to my students and my staff members and the policies and the procedures that we had to focus on. I can be honest and say that my first year was not necessarily as great as I wanted it to be. There were a lot of learning curves within there, but we're going to fast forward a decade, little more than a decade, and I receive a phone call from an individual, and she says, Kiesha, I would love if you could come and provide some professional development for us. And this person was a new hire, a teacher that I hired who has now transitioned into the Dean of Instruction role at the school that I was the founding principal of. And for me, it really resonates that building a community is more than just one particular incident. It's the many actions and words that you say to individuals that allows that community to be built, for that relationship to be there, and for someone to want to reach out to you years later, even though you were the stickler boss that you were in the beginning, but she stayed with me long enough to change. And I believe that's what servant leadership is. You take a moment back and you reflect, what can I do differently? And over the course of the years, I had an opportunity to do that. So I want to share a few things with you before we dive in. I've had an opportunity, as Deanna shared, to work in a variety of backgrounds. Started off with City Year as their training project leader. I was a teacher. I was an instructional coach at the founding year of a school. And then I transitioned to being the founding principal of an elementary school on Milwaukee's Northwest Side. Loved it, but after that, I transitioned to higher ed and actually had an opportunity to work with Deanna and Liz at MSOE as the director of the MBA EL program. And then shifted gears a little bit. I'm now in healthcare with Advocate Aurora Health and leadership development. I also have my own coaching and consulting business, and I'm a real estate agent as well. So, wearing many hats, as Deanna stated. But with all of that in mind, I want you to know that leadership is not a title. It is a way of thinking. So I'm sorry if there are some other high leaders in the room, but we've come here to learn more about what servant leadership is. So your title doesn't matter. It really is how you think and therefore how you behave. So I want to share some small moments with you, and we're going to dive deeper into that principalship role because for me, that was the most impactful time in leadership that I had an opportunity to be a servant to those around me. I wanted to pull out some of the principles of servant leadership that we talk about. There are 10 of them, and there are four primary ones that stood out to me as we're going to discuss today: listening, empathy, awareness, and commitment to growth. And for me, all four of those align with emotionally intelligent leadership. And so, if you are emotionally intelligent, you will have a tremendous impact on your team, on your colleagues, on the greater community, but you will then see yourself building a community. Uh, Emotional intelligence, if you look at Daniel Goleman's work, listening, empathy, and self awareness are already called out. And then I just said social skills for the commitment to growth for other people. So you can couple them into those categories. But let's dive in a little bit. So let's talk about listening. So my staff once told me, Kiesha, you're a robot. Now, no, you're not staring at a robot. You're looking at a living, breathing human being with a heart and a mind. But that's what they told me. And it stemmed from them predicting the responses that I would share with them. And I thought it was a good thing to have some predictability. You know how I'm going to respond. You know what I expect. But when when I took a step back and realized, what are they really trying to say to me? It was that my responses were not genuine and authentic, that I was not truly listening to what it was that they were saying, but I already had my response ready to provide to them. So, what could I do differently? I took an opportunity and I said, we're going to do less walk and talks. I don't know about you, but in busy environments, I'm like, hey, let's walk and talk and have this meeting. Let's not do that. Let me be able to sit down and look at you eye to eye and really hear what you're saying. I wanted to hear from them, what could I do differently? I opened up our evaluations, which we have 4 times a year, and said, instead of me just evaluating you, you evaluate me. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What do I need to stop, start, and continue doing to be the best leader for you? And then with that in mind, I themed it. And I brought it back to the staff. Here are the themes that I'm pulling out from the feedback that you've provided, and here's what I'm committing to do. Letting them know that I'm listening to them and will then make a change based upon what they've shared. Let's dive into empathy, another principle that has been shared. Everyone wants to feel like they are accepted and recognized. And by all means, we were big on shout outs and sharing that with our team and recognizing them for things. But when it came to attendance, now that was one thing I was a stickler on. But I had a staff member who was habitually late. And so I wanted to assume best intent, but I sat down with her and I said, hey, what's going on? And she shared with me that she was in a physically abusive relationship and that she was staying with someone else and coming late to work to alter her schedule because her partner knew what time and where she would be. And by no means did I expect to hear that from her. But in the moment, we had to pivot. I had to listen and I had to be empathetic for what was happening, and together we created an action plan, resources, helping her figure out who to go to, what it is that she could do to rectify the situation that was happening in her life. Now, it was hard, but she worked through it. And as leaders, we have to moccasin, put ourselves in our teammates, in our friends, in our colleagues' shoes. But one thing that I had to learn was that as we're sliding in those shoes and we're walking a mile in their shoes, we also have to remember to step back and take those shoes off. Because we can often hold on to everyone else's hurt, pain, lives, and that becomes way too much for us to handle. And that's when burnout comes in leadership. So we have to be able to moccasin, but then take those shoes back off. The next one that I want to talk to you about is awareness. Now, as leaders, and remember, leadership is not a title, it's a way of thinking. So I don't care what your role is, you're a leader. So you are mirroring for others the behavior that you want to see by your engagement. That is what we do as leaders. And at one particular time, I was leaving the building and some incidents occurred, and I came back and my staff was like, well, Ms. Johnnies, when this happened, we said, what would Kiesha do? And at first it was amusing. I'm like, okay, great. Yes, you have my mindset. You're thinking about what would I do? But then the 24-year-old who had to learn and develop and grow and understand and gain confidence and know that there are some insecurities in areas that I just don't know some things. And I have to be self-aware enough to say, I don't have all the answers. I hired you for the skill sets that you bring to the table, and I want you to answer, what would you do? Not what would Kiesha do, because what you would do may be completely different and may be the best decision for our students, for our staff, for our community. And so we had to shift our mindset. And I had to shift my mindset and understanding what I brought to the table wasn't all that my team needed. But collectively, that's how we're going to build in this community that we have. I don't have all the answers. And so I want to be transparent with you that you don't either. And that's okay. That's okay. We're going to talk about commitment to growth. Now, if you've ever taken StrengthsFinder, achievement is like number one for me. And so I love to grow. I want to figure out what's next, and I want the same for my staff. I had a food service personnel. She started with me, young lady, and I said, where do you want to be in 5 years? This is not going to be your role in 5 years. You can start and we can work together now, but where do you want to be? And I guarantee she stayed with me for maybe 3 years, and then we transitioned her somewhere else. But I want the best for you because you bring so much value to the community, to our team, that as leaders, sometimes we stifle the growth that people can have because we want them to stay with us. You're so great that I want you here. But if we let them spread their wings and fly, imagine the impact that they would have, not just in our environment or in our sector, but for the greater good of our entire community. With my staff members, we had stretch goals. Outside of what you do on your day-to-day basis, what else would you like to grow in? How can I support you? We had transparent conversations with staff members that I knew weren't going to stay with me. They shared with me, I'm going to apply for a different position or go to this other organization next year. Thank you for letting me know, one, so I can hire for that position as it comes up. But two, what can I do to support you? Have you applied? Are you interviewing? Do you need a letter of recommendation? Those were ways that I was able to engage and have staff members who left my school still want to engage with me, still be able to build community, still be able to say, hey, I love you. This is more than just the work that we do and the results that we need from people, but the relationships that we build. Last but not least, building community, that's what we're here for. And as you've seen on every slide, is just pictures of my school and pictures with my staff members. I couldn't talk about them without showing you them. But each and every action that we take impacts our larger community, whether it's our students, our families, the Granville community, which our school was in, or the larger nation, because there were people who left and moved and went to different states, went to different countries. You're impacting more than just the person that's sitting next to you when you are being loving, kind, and nice, when you are listening, when you are sharing. You have a much larger impact than what you actually think. My last year as a principal, my gym teacher, retired from his career, asked me a question and said something to me that I will never forget. And he's like, Miss Johnnies, what are you doing? It was a Friday. Trash needed to be taken out. I took the trash out and I'm washing the can out because it was dirty. And I'm like, I'm just taking the trash out. And he's like, we will not find anyone like you. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, most leaders won't do what you do, how you do it. And if you think about that term, it's stuck with me forever, because leadership is not I have a title and I'm too good to do anything. But leadership is how can I support you? Now, by all means, there was a conversation after for the person who was supposed to take the trash out and accountability for that. But at the end of the day, I want to leave it better than I found it. And so I'm not going to go home for the weekend and leave the trash sitting here. That's not what we're going to do. So I say all of that to say you play a vital role in building our community. I learned so many lessons in my first couple of years as a principal, and struggled to get to where I was in leadership, daily in the grind, learning as a leader, gaining feedback from individuals, being open and willing to listen on how I could do things differently. And that's why I started the coaching consultant, so that other leaders would not have to struggle as I did. And we can close the gap and you can recognize your blind spots so that you can lead effectively. Relationships, I touched on earlier, are so key and important. I would have never had an opportunity to be able to provide professional development for a school that I left years ago without building relationships with the staff that I had and the community that I had. So if it's not just getting a number or an email address from someone in the room that you have not met before, build a relationship today, because you don't know the community that you will impact. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.